Hey everyone, you know what a Kiro is? You're going to. You're watching TechStrong Gang. Hey everyone, good morning to you. It's Alan Shimel for TechStrong Gang. If you couldn't tell, well, you could see the logo back here, but if you couldn't tell, we are in Las Vegas continuing our AWS reInvent coverage of reInvent 2025. It's been a great show. You're watching this already on Thursday, so we've had 2 days of coverage here. We hope you've been able to catch them. If you haven't, don't worry. They'll be available on TechStrong TV or the TechStrong TV YouTube channel and OTT channel, probably by early next week or so. But our Crackerjack video team is busy editing these as we're shooting them. So good for that. We've got a good panel of, we got the core panel here, core 3. Used to say the core 4, but that would be the Yankees. Core 3, we've got Mitch Ashley on my far right. Mike Vizard in the middle, and of course, I'm Alan Shimel. Gentlemen, welcome to the gang. It's great to have you on this morning. So, continuing our, I feel like Sherman marching through Atlanta, continuing our agentic AI campaign through Las Vegas.
True that.
I thought we'd start off with a little Kiro.
Yeah, so we are definitely on the wrong end of the fire hose here, but a lot of stuff coming down the pike from these folks. But Kiro is this AI coding tool that AWS created and is now updating to add something called Kiro Powers, which are basically a set of specialized agents that have been trained to perform specific tasks, including autonomously with hooks and links to an MCP server to call things like Datadog and whatever else do we want to invoke as part of a workflow for the developer. And in a lot of ways, I think, what we're seeing is a lot of shifting further left of various DevOps tasks into the developer, I guess what we might call the inner loop. And what's interesting about all these new AI agents is that it continues a conversation you and I were having yesterday about the fact that they only load when needed. And so they're reducing the total cost of using these AI agents because there's sort of one AI agent that keeps track of what the developer is doing and then automatically invokes these specialized agents when needed. But Mitch, you're closer to this than I am. What's your take on what's going on here with AI coding tools? Because I feel like they're getting a whole lot smarter, faster than we thought.
It's the move if you want to use the term agentic DevOps. Basically, we wire these things together now today, whether it's a CI/CD process or plugging in, scanning for vulnerabilities or deploying, whatever it might be, and observability, things like that. And you do see a lot of effort today around hooking in observability, security earlier in the development process. And that's part of what they're doing through these agents. It's also pre-integrated. I mean, the agent knows how to talk to Dynatrace, and you mentioned Datadog. There's others. I think they're launching with about 6 or 7 companies.
And there's Postman's in there and a bunch of others.
Yeah.
So wait a second, though. I got a question here.
Yes, gentleman in the far left of the room.
So what you're trying to tell me is that we're teaching agentic AI to shift left?
Finally, somebody's shifting left.
Okay. I thought shift left was passé. I thought we went through our shift left period.
Well, now it does bring up an interesting question because just because you can do something doesn't mean people will. So it may wind up just being too overwhelming for somebody to cognitively keep track of because all these things now are happening in parallel. So if I'm writing code and suddenly, an AI agent's popping up going, hey, you want me to run this? Or we need to do this, it's kind of like, well, I think when you're writing code, it's kind of like, even with the help of AI, it's still as much art as it is science. So how much of this stuff winds up just interrupting the flow?
Very, very, you could get pestered just like pop-ups and notifications and et cetera, I think is your point. Absolutely. Well, it's got to be managed through some kind of a control plane, whether that's inside the IDE. More likely, it's probably part of something like Agent Core, or something's got to orchestrate and control what the agents are doing. I doubt that's going to start that way. I think it's going to start by the developers running, doing their thing, leveraging these agents. They'll build them into their workflows. If they're bothersome, they'll kick them out or make them more useful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me give you Shimmy's take on this one. So, when you talk to my friends in platform engineering, they tell you one of the reasons that platform engineering rose is because in DevOps, the whole shift left thing just really didn't work. And it didn't work as well as intended because it just put too much on the developer's plate. So by putting too much on the developer's plate, the developer did what developers do, which said, the heck with this, I'm not doing it, right? I want to code. And so we've seen this whole rise of platform engineering to put a platform together to allow the developer to do what he wants to do within the guardrails and policies that we want. So along comes this idea of saying, hey, instead of letting the developer do it, we're going to have an autonomous agentic AI do these tasks. And so the developer won't have to. He could just code, or he or she could just code like they want to. And now we're saying, wait a second, this thing is going to be a PIA. It's just going to pop up and do all of that. You don't think the developer is going to say the same thing and say, this is a PIA. I'm not going to pay attention to it.
I think there's going to be some balance in that equation, but I also think, it goes back to what we were talking about a couple of days ago with AWS. They clearly think that they are going to be the platform engineering team for the developers. And so they're more than just an infrastructure provider in their minds. They're saying we're going to provide various types of DevOps AI agents, and they are going to be the manager of the DevOps workflow and the platform engineering team for all these developers out there. And that's how they're starting to think of DevOps as more of a managed service rather than something that a bunch of software engineers are trying to support on behalf of 100 developers. They're kind of inserting themselves into that process. Is that how you see it?
I think so. I do see it that way. And I think you skipped a step, which is the developers are the people who experiment with things, right? Maybe platform engineers do, but developers definitely do. Not all of them, but most are. They'll get on, they'll try these agents, they'll see what's useful, but they'll get to a point where they say, okay, now the hassle factor, I don't want to deal with this anymore. Can someone take this? And then now that we have platform engineering, I don't think it has to be, the sysadmin who runs the build, who can take this. It's the platform engineering team can work with the development team and say, all right, you guys try this stuff out, see what's helpful. We'll make sure it's wired the right way into our tool set. And we'll keep the things that are helpful to us. But I think your point also is correct of AWS is to figure out how to compete with GitHub, How do we provide not just the tool to write code? How do we create an environment for creating software and agents, integrating all these things? We've got all the rest of the infrastructure from, hardware all the way up to databases and security. And let's start to build an environment you can really kind of pre-integrate these things together.
My problem with it is you can't please all the people all the time. We all can't be right here. One of us is wrong.
Well, clearly it's... Thanks for stepping up, Alan.
No, I'm not admitting to anything. I know nothing. But
love it. He's such a giving guy. He's really just taking...
But here's the thing. When I talk about platforms and platform engineering, when platform engineering first came out and we talked about platforms, if you managed your Kubernetes, you were a good platform engineer, right? You had a nice Kubernetes workflow. You had your CI/CD pipeline cooking, and wow, you're a genuine platform engineer. And then a funny thing happened. Platform engineering shifted focus to IDPs. Right, internal developer platforms, backstage, and its ilk. Are you saying that these Kiro agents, these agentic AI agents that Amazon's coming, are going to form a new IDP? They're going to run in the existing IDP backstage or what have you? Because is that really where we want them there? Or are they after the fact. Because if we want them in the IDP and they're generating the code and they're doing all of these things, we are fundamentally changing the role of the developer. The developer becomes less the person who develops code and more the person who's going to manage the agents who develop code.
Yes.
That is.
I'm asking my developers out there, raise your hand if that's what you want your job to be.
So hold on a minute before we jump fully off the bridge. Let's stop about halfway down. So here's where we
It's
are.
un-American, and I won't stand for it.
That's where we're going to march. Let's protest. I mean, look at what's happened so far. We've gone from every tech executive in the world saying, we don't need developers anymore because I can build a snake game on my computer, right? We don't need people to write software. Where are all the tools that are coming out? They're tools for developers to use AI to build software. So are you going to write less code? Hey, I'm happy not to write all the code if it's good code. I'm happy not to write every piece of code if I know it's going to work and not cause me more work, right? As AI gets better at doing these tasks, generating some of the code, doing code reviews. Now it has to be done in a way, it can't be the intrusion prevention of work system,
Right.
like we saw with IDSs and IDPs. But developers do these things already. They already orchestrate work. They already work on design. They already craft software. They write code, but that's actually a small part of what they do.
The 80% of what they were doing that's not writing code is all this stuff.
Yes.
So we're trying to automate that while they're sitting there. But your point is well taken, right? Because on the other side of it, developers are going to pick or have a lot of influence over which of these AI coding tools that they're going to use. And some of these decisions may be made by, a CIO who's going to sit there and say, this is our standard, folks, and this is what you're going to use.
And that definitely happens.
Right. And then there's going to be folks who are where the developer has more influence over which tool they're going to want to use. And they may like OpenAI or Microsoft or whatever it is, or Anthropic's coding tools better for some reason. And then there'll probably be some middle ground between turning on every platform engineering AI agent there is and me wanting to be comfortable automating a couple of functions like observability of my code as I'm writing it versus still relying on a platform engineering team. So I don't think that this is, an either or. It's a spectrum of things that will vary widely depending on the nature of the organization using it.
So it's a spectrum.
It is a spectrum.
Well, we know developers.
Does that have anything to do with vaccines?
No, but as we have noted on this show many times, we are all on the spectrum.
Yes, we are. So I appreciate the conversation. Let me bring this home to a business conclusion. We spoke yesterday about, to a certain degree, and I spoke about it last night with Daniel Newman. We think we recorded that, yes. This reInvent has been a big pivot for AWS because the perception was they were trailing Google and Microsoft in AI. And they came out guns a-blazing with AI all the time, all AI all the time. You said something before about Microsoft. You haven't mentioned Google. Google had a great week last week in the stock market, right? Yeah. Because I think the market recognizes that Google may have the best vertically and horizontally integrated stack among the hyperscalers. They have it all. Microsoft has some great tools though too. They have GitHub.
They have
in their back pocket.
150 million of their
right, and they always had a great developer channel before GitHub even.
Exactly.
But they've got GitHub. They've got Azure. They have the OpenAI relationship as well as their own Copilot AI things.
They also own the enterprise.
And they own the enterprise. Formidable competition here. Now, AWS, look, developers built the AWS that we see here today. There's no doubt. They were developers love to whip out their credit card and open up instances on AWS. But they didn't have a GitHub analog. They don't have Google's stack.
Yep. Agreed.
And so what AWS is doing here is this is their claim to a stack, or at least the beginning of an AWS stack that'll run on Trainium processors as well as on NVIDIA. And they'll have an analog to a GitHub or some sort of developer IDP. And they love open source. They could take Backstage.
Yeah. And they'll go one step further. They'll say that rather than just focusing on Gemini or OpenAI, they're going to say we
plug anything in Bedrock.
You can plug anything you want in here, and we will automatically optimize the right AI model for the job based on the cost and the level of accuracy that you want. And it will just be something I tune rather than something that I decide that I'm going to be like all in on OpenAI or I'm going to be all in on Gemini 3.
And they're not completely out of the model game. They have the Nova models. I'm not saying that's
they're right. They have Nova.
Where the others are. But hey, they're at least attempting to make a play in that.
Well, but they're also giving you the ability through Nova Forge to make your own models to a certain extent.
But
so crazy like a fox.
Yeah, we talked about that the other day, though. It's going to be, Nova's kind of like, the generic version of the prescription drug, right? It's does enough, and it's cheaper, and it's
the AWS way. It's the AWS way. 80% for 20%.
Right.
And it is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about Nova in our next segment.
All right, let's take a break on TechStrong, gang. We'll be right back.
Discover TechStrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with TechStrong Group.
So we are going to shift the gear here a little bit because AWS is talking about making it simpler to retrain AI models and also customize them. So the retraining is a function of Bedrock where they're kind of streamlining that whole process so that I don't have to have a PhD to go fix the AI model. And I can fix the AI model on two parameters. One is I can make it more accurate, or I can also make it less costly. And so they're trying to make the whole play simpler for mere mortals, or I wouldn't call it everybody, but we're getting past the point where I need a data scientist to do all this stuff. And what was interesting to me about this particular capability is that it shows up first on Nova models, oddly enough, and then it's going to show up on all this other stuff later. Mm-hmm. So they're starting to send a signal that says that maybe Nova is not just an also-ran, it's going to be like their preferred platform, and then everything else we'll see later on other models at some point. And then they're also talking about within SageMaker, which is their managed servers for building AI apps, that they're going to add some ability to have a serverless capability for customizing the models. Mm-hmm. So you get a little more granular control over today what is pretty much, a take it or leave it kind of approach to building out an AI model. And I think that's a fair assessment of what they're talking about and thinking about doing.
Good coverage of it.
From your perspective, as you look at all that, are we kind of getting closer to the democratization of the building of AI models so that I don't need to have a whole bunch of data scientists to do every little thing? Because that seems to be the gating factor in my mind. I can't find enough of those people, and they're expensive, and they work for me for 6 months and somebody steals them.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a duality here, which is bring your AI, bring your models, we'll use whatever and you, of course, you can use our Nova, our AWS Nova models. On the other hand, what they're doing with Forge is bring your data and train our models, your instance of it, if you will, on your data rather than doing everything through an MCP access, right? Well, what does that create? I'm not going to move Nova over to somebody else's service. I'm going to run that in AWS. There's stickiness right there. Mm-hmm. I think that's the brilliant move behind not just making it more, lowering the bar to be able to train models yourself and not have to be a genius.
I love a duality, Mitch.
You know, I'm all about the duality. So I looked that word up.
Back to a
It's my word of the day. It was in my
I learned about duality in St. John's in a theology class.
Oh, you did?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Light and dark and all of this Zoroastrianism.
I wasn't doing the evil good thing, but you know.
No, but there's a duality. But here's the, I guess for me, the crux of it. With this Forge tool, I'm not looking to create a model that's going to take on Anthropic or Open or any of this. To me, Forge, you know, when we did our hackathon almost 2 years ago on operationalizing AI, we had all those really smart people, a lot of brain power in that room. It was clear to me listening to them that large frontier LLMs were not the answer for everything. They're good for consumers to play around with and do a lot of things, and maybe for marketing and analyst people, you know, but not for everything. And we were going to need small language models, right? SLMs. We were going to, you know, and back then they were, you know, Patrick and John and those folks were doing vector databases to introduce.
Just the beginning of that for MCP and what became MCP.
What became MCP. RAG, stuff like this. So to me, is Forge a better mousetrap to build my SLM? And then do I maybe plug that into Bedrock and I still have an OpenAI or a frontier model behind it?
I think we're going to go back to the word spectrum. So there's 4 tiers to this thing, right? I can build a foundational model a la OpenAI and all those things. Then I can
But
use...
you really can't.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying as the spectrum. That's the top end of the world. Then you use Forge to build your own foundational model. You're not really building a SLM with that. You're building, and it's for global 2,000 companies that are going to build a fairly large model. Then there's all these tools underneath in Bedrock that I can use to, I don't have to be as big an expert, and I'm going to use those to build SLMs, and I'm going to use those to kind of make that more accessible to a broader number of people. And then underneath that is SageMaker, which is kind of this total managed service where I just basically show up and describe what it is that I want done, and SageMaker will automatically generate it for me. And they're all kind of like on a different set of classes of things. And
Like
customers,
Skittles in the rainbow.
I guess, yeah.
Taste the rainbow.
Yeah, it gets a little complicated, but you know, from their point of view, there are different classes of companies using different levels of AI.
So there I got to disagree with you. I think companies will use different classes. It's not this class goes to that company.
Yeah.
One company in one instance may want to use the Forge or Nova, but at another instant or in another instance or in another team or at another juncture, that we don't need that right now. I just need the SageMaker thing.
This is true.
Right. And I think that's what we got to understand is this is not, as AI continues to develop, this is not a one size fits all, and it's not, I just need a one solution. I need the whole spectrum.
Well, the analogy I would use is if you're not a frontier model company, which AWS is not at the level, of course, of a OpenAI or Anthropic, what do? You sell people. You're an arms dealer, you're a picks and shovel dealer, you're selling the tools, right? And I think that's to your point about the spectrum of, depending on what you want to do, how invested you want to be in creating your own models versus using models versus customizing access to them. That's the strategy here.
Yeah. I got a question regarding chip usage in this spectrum, though. As we go to that on that spectrum from left to right, from ultraviolet to infrared, where do I need my GPUs and where do these Trainium chips fit in?
It remains to be seen because, you know, right now, I think most people are using Trainium as an alternative for inference engines. I can, though, you know, AWS is talking about Trainium 4 here, which, you know, right now doesn't exist. It's just a piece of paper with some specs on it.
But you're right, but let's be fair. They came out with Trainium 2. They said, we're coming out with Trainium 3, and they did.
Yeah. So the point is, I think a significant portion of the AI training will move to AI accelerators. And for two simple facts. One is GPUs are more expensive. And two is GPUs have a lot of code in there for graphics that have squat to do with AI, and they're not the most efficient way to do that. And they only happily, accidentally wound up being the platform for AI because they existed. And somebody went, well, that's the best thing for training in parallel. So here we go. But if we have processors that are designed for the task specifically, and it's not just training them, there's a small army of these things starting to show up. More and more of those training and inference sets are going to wind up on things other than GPUs. And they're going to be less costly to run. They're going to consume less energy, and it's going to have an interesting impact on stock valuations.
I think it's all about economics and availability. I mean, that's the game right now, right?
Yeah.
If you can provide an alternative, maybe it's not as fast, maybe it's not quite as cutting edge as some things about NVIDIA. Yeah. On the other hand, the other thing they did with the training environment is they open sourced the SDK. They came out with an SDK for that. To fight against basically the non-open source version of what NVIDIA does with their SDK. So there's another attraction.
I thought NVIDIA's SDK is open.
I don't think it's open source. I'll double check, but I don't believe it's open source.
I think it's not within a consortium, but I believe like large aspects.
It's not a Linux Foundation thing,
right.
But it's open.
It could be. Maybe it is.
Because I've seen CUDA libraries showing up in other products.
CUDA is definitely open.
Yeah, so there's pieces of that are probably open, but it's just a question of who's open and who's writing all the code.
My feeling though is this: if you're AWS, every time you got to write those big checks over to Jensen, you wince a little bit, right?
Jensen was here doing the thing, man. But
they're partners.
Yeah,
they're partners. That makes no difference, right? I mean, what's his name? Who wrote the Art of War? Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu. Your partner could be your competitor too, right?
It's true.
So they're partners, but every time they write them a check, they don't think to themselves, well, I'd like that money staying right here.
Yeah, of course.
And so it would be ludicrous and naive. Who's naive now? To think that they're not going to put their thumb on the scale and say, oh no, this is a job for Trainium, not a Blackwell or something like that. And quite frankly, look, Google's going to do the same thing.
Now, interestingly enough, the thing they're swimming against is that there's a certain amount of good old-fashioned marketing mojo behind NVIDIA these days. And you go talk to data science teams, and they're like, I absolutely have to have the latest, greatest GPUs. And frankly, they're not really thinking about like what are the cost implications of that. They just want the latest, greatest as well.
Greatest.
Or like my career path is being trained on Cisco, right? So, but I'm in this case being trained on NVIDIA.
Well, everyone it's FOMO. It's a little bit of a Boca thing. You all want that kind of thing. Again, I had this conversation last night with Daniel Newman about this, which is, at least for the foreseeable future, NVIDIA will probably stay a generation or maybe two in performance out ahead of the Trainiums and the Google chips and the Broadcoms and what have you. But as much as the developer wants to be on that latest and greatest and the data scientist wants to be on the latest and greatest, if the price gap is wide enough, I'm sorry, right?
And if I can run it on my desktop, I'm even happier.
And happier, exactly.
Right, because ultimately a CFO and a CEO will sit there and look at the IT guy and go, excuse me, you want to do what for how much?
Yeah. And that's where I think to a certain extent AWS may be betting on that, and they're not alone. I think Google is too, and I think you're going to see Microsoft do it. I think Meta was going in that direction, though things seem to have gotten a little rocky over there.
I hear the phrase token sticker shock a lot.
Yeah, and that again though, what's interesting is this is all part of this continuing evolution that is what we're going through with this, and we'll see how it shakes out. But we're going to shake out with a break right here, come back and talk about our third segment from AWS reInvent on TechStrong Gang.
You've earned it. The spotlight, the responsibility, the weight of teams, companies, and entire industries fall on your shoulders. Lives depend on your decisions, your home life included. At work, you're protected, physically and digitally. Nothing gets through your team without a fight. But in a globally connected world, everyone sees you, including those who mean to cause you and your organization harm. And now home, your sanctuary. Attackers see an opportunity. Your digital front door is wide open. And what compromises your home can breach your boardroom. Because the devil's greatest trick isn't targeting your workplace firewall. It's convincing you that your personal life isn't at risk. Black Cloak. Digital executive protection, defending the new attack surface. Your personal life.
All right, folks, we're back with our third and final segment of the day from AWS reInvent, and we're talking about Strands, which is this software development kit that AWS open sourced earlier this year, and now they're adding support for TypeScript to this. And it's basically an SDK for building AI agents, and it makes that whole process a lot simpler. Now, the other thing that they were talking about was related to AI agents too, was they now have a tool that will help automate the building of the UI for the AI agent, which is, the AI agent still has to have something that looks like a user interface on it. And that's not something that everybody's very good at, so they're providing some tools to automate that process as well. They were talking, and we discussed a couple of days ago, we're talking about billions and billions of Carl Sagan AI agents that we're supposed to be building and deploying. Right now, that feels like a fairly manual process, maybe? Or so is that whole thing going to become automated, and what does that look like?
Well, you said the word TypeScript, which is code, right? So we're coding agents today. End users aren't. I mean, in our Google workspace, right, we're using Flow, that we're not writing code to do that. We're using a UI to do it. But to do what developers need to do, they write code. It's just that sophisticated. The Strands SDK, what it does is basically build around models. So it's all about the prompt and getting the model that you're accessing and making it really simple to create an agent to go do that. It's the things that it's the framework that the developers have to go build if they're going to write it from scratch, right? So you don't have to do that. If you contrast to like what Microsoft announced, they announced their agent framework about 2 months ago or so. That's about orchestration. So companies are tackling different parts of this, right? The Strands doesn't do orchestration. That's part of Bedrock and what we're looking for that to do. So people are working at the pieces of it. But I think if you back up for a minute and say, there's a couple of new SDKs that AWS came out. Sounds a lot like a development company to me. Company telling developers, back to our first conversation. In other words, one more thing saying we're trying to recapture the developer persona to come be on our platform, use our tools.
And they made it open source out of the gate, so they definitely have a plan to make this thing as broadly available as possible.
Well, that addresses the lock-in. You can't claim lock-in then.
And now they're also talking about using that tool to build AI agents that will be deployed at the edge, including for robotics applications, which has been the hot topic of AI as a
physical AI you're talking about.
Right.
That's the one that's going to eliminate poverty, jobs,
among other things. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's all into Star Trek.
And might someday be the final killer app for WASM that we've been waiting for now for about 4 or 5 years.
Akamai will be happy, right?
Well, that's what's going to do it.
Did you know Akamai bought?
Yeah.
It was interesting. They made a bet on WASM.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question, and forgive me. I'm not quite as up on this, but are we saying that AI agents will create AI agents?
Yes, absolutely. AI is going to write its own code at some point.
At some point. In the short term, it's still going to, most of them are going to be built by good old-fashioned human developers, but eventually an AI agent will be able to
So would that be some sort of self-replication?
Be polymorphic code, basically.
Polymorphic, self-replicating.
Code writing code. Could be changing its own code, could be writing other agents in real time.
I mean,
Godlike to me.
sounds like a worm to me, but what do I know?
Or about this. Definitely could do that.
I guess it all depends on your outlook. Me, I'm looking for God. They're looking for bacteria and viruses and worms.
It's a spectrum.
It's a spectrum. There's the spectrum for you right there.
But there is theoretically, something could go wrong where something starts spawning AI agents out of, hundreds of these things, and then you got to go clean them up somewhere. But I imagine there'll probably be an AI agent for cleanup too.
Be the mop-up agent, or
Well, don't they have those in Zion?
It's in
The Matrix.
Yeah, what do they call them? I can't remember.
They're like the octopusy looking things that
The Sentry agents.
Yeah. And the agents may even have a set time life, right? And they're just going to self-destruct after 6 months and be replaced by another AI agent.
I got to tell you, I'm just so damn proud of myself that I was able to get a Matrix one in here. Thank you, Agent Smith.
Well, that's because you think we already in Matrix.
Right. Well,
This is really-
I won't lie to you. There are days I do. Red pill, blue pill. Guys, you know what? Let's tie a bow on this. It's been a really eventful reInvent, right? Look, usually, you come here to reInvent and AWS is just gurgitating out one release and announcement after the next. And it probably takes you 3 months to digest all of it and kind of make heads or tails. This isn't that different. They put out a ton of stuff, but it is so focused and it make it so obvious, right, that this is where their attention is right now.
Yeah, they probably have 1,000 other things going on, but what they chose to highlight here shows a narrative, and there's a thought process as to how all this is playing out. I'm not sure that, other companies aren't doing the same thing, and in fact, I suspect that they all are. But it's interesting to me that AWS is getting better at articulating the mission and how all the piece parts come together, and doing it, frankly, in a way that is better than the other companies that I've seen so far.
There are some, like, trying to weave it together. What does this mean? How does this work together? Because it isn't all being introduced at once, right? It's a lot of parts. So sometimes it's obvious, like, okay, this is clearly what they're doing. Other times it's not quite sure. Whether it's AWS, Microsoft, Google, whoever it is.
Agreed. Hey, we've got one more TechStrong gang that we're going to record out here for tomorrow. So very excited by that. We'll continue the conversation. But for now, I think we're going to wrap it up. We've got Mitch. I know you've got a ton of briefings to do. And
All day.
we got stuff happening. So until later or until tomorrow, that's going to wrap up our TechStrong gang coverage. But hey, we've got a full day of live coverage I'll be doing here at our TechStrong studios at AWS reInvent high atop the tower here at the Wynn. And stay tuned for that. But until then, on behalf of Mitchell and Mike and myself, have a great day, everyone. Enjoy our coverage. We're out.